The first rays of dawn sparkled on the moving truck's windshield as it sat parked by the curb, its motor purring steadily in time with my pounding heart. I was out in the front yard, holding my clipboard and ticking off the final boxes from my relocation checklist, when the sharp squeal of brakes pierced the air. A sleek silver SUV veered sharply into my driveway, cutting off the truck's way entirely. Karen, our overbearing HOA president, emerged from it, her business suit rumpled as if she'd dashed out in a frenzy. Her features were already locked into that signature scowl of self-righteous fury. She strode straight at me like a commander charging into war, her high heels striking the pavement in a rhythmic warning of the clash ahead. "You aren't leaving this spot," she declared, folding her arms across her torso like an unbreakable wall. "Not before settling your overdue dues to our neighborhood." A knowing grin spread across my face as I slipped a hand into my coat pocket, retrieving the bulky manila envelope I'd kept ready for precisely this showdown. Its heft brought a sense of triumph to my grip. All those months of groundwork packed neatly into one decisive bundle. "In fact, Karen," I replied, my tone smooth and serene like a glassy lake, "I've got just the thing for you." Her smug grin wavered as I held the envelope out to her. She snatched it with wary hands, her flawlessly polished nails glinting in the sunlight while she ripped it apart. I observed with quiet glee, as her expression shifted from cocky assurance to utter astonishment, blood fading from her face as she rifled through the official papers within. After 3 years enduring life in Willowbrook Estates, I'd reached the end of my rope with Karen Mitchell's tyrannical control. She turned our peaceful suburb into her private domain, brandishing the HOA handbook like a club against anyone who stepped out of line. My cry-me offense? I'd coated my entry door in navy blue rather than the mandated midnight blue. The shade variation was undetectable to anyone normal, but Karen's hawk-like scrutiny caught it at once, slapping me with the $200 penalty and a haughty lecture on upholding neighborhood aesthetics. That incident merely kicked things off. Across the years, penalties piled up for lawn blades exceeding 2 inches in height, a mailbox tilted 3 degrees from plumb, and holiday lights lingering until January 2nd instead of midnight on the 31st. Every infraction arrived via Karen's classic condescending memo, invariably closing with, "In service to our shared community principles." Fine-spection checks were even more invasive than the charges. Karen materialized without warning, tape measure at the ready, snapping photos of my entire lot. She'd scale fences for better views, scrutinize garbage bins with lab-like accuracy, and on one occasion wielded a color chart to confirm my window covers aligned with the permitted hue. Fellow residents murmured that she maintained exhaustive dossiers on each household, logging every breach alongside daily routines. But I snapped when she slapped me with the $500 levy for rampant dandelions out back, plants scarcely noticeable from the road. Selling that did it. I resolved to offload the house and seek a sanctuary where owning property didn't mimic surveillance under a lens. The transaction started seamlessly. An eager young pair snapped it up as their starter nest. I'd settled all dues down to the penny, secured every required HOA approval, and locked in the closing for Tuesday dawn. All seemed airtight until Loa concerned sigh. Just 5 days before departure, chaos erupted. The city permit desk rang first, stating my relocation authorization was yanked over unresolved HOA flags. Probing further, I learned Karen had lodged a grievance alleging risks of harm from the hauling rig to the grounds. Next, my agent phoned with fresh trouble. Karen had hounded the purchasers herself, alerting them to hidden flaws and urging a rethink of their bid. By the following morning, a flyer was affixed to my entrance, alleging a $3,000 tab for backlogged communal upkeep costs that had mysteriously never surfaced till now. It warned of slapping a lien on the deed unless cleared in 48 hours flat. My spotless credit score and unclouded ownership hung in the balance. A HOA meeting cornered Karen at the subsequent HOA gathering in the rec hall, forever reeking of stale brew and regret. She presided from the table's head, bookended by her sycophantic counsel, who bobbed agreement to her utterances like dashboard dolls. As I voiced my alarms over the surprise charges and permit snags, She flashed a smile chillier than a polar gale. The HOA holds the mandate to safeguard asset worth, she intoned, her tone laced with phony empathy. We've just uncovered multiple undocumented infractions from your stay. Plus, queries linger over harm to shared spaces on your watch. We're empowered to hold your closing funds pending fixes. Everything's by the book, I promise. The rest of the Pinelli couldn't sleep sidestepped my stare, fidgeting with documents anxiously. Tom, off Maple Street, appeared especially uneasy, shooting me a fleeting, sorry look before fixing eyes downward. A profound unease permeated the whole ordeal. That evening, sleep eluded me completely. Karen's arrogant smirk lingered in my mind as I lay awake, twisting in the sheets and reliving every cutting word she had spoken. At 3:00 a.m., I finally abandoned any hope of sleep, flipped open my laptop, and plunged into the HOA's publicly available records and court filings. What I uncovered sent an icy chill through my veins, quickly replaced by a searing wave of fury. What I found: Karen had been methodically tacking on fake charges to numerous homeowners' accounts. Late fees materialized for dues that had been paid promptly, with the original transaction dates somehow changed in the ledger. Unauthorized liens had been placed on at least 6 homes over the last year, all of them, not coincidentally, belonging to residents who were selling or who had openly defied Karen's rule. I learned that Tom from Maple Street had been saddled with the $2,000 landscaping penalty shortly after he cast a vote against Karen's plan to place ornamental rocks at the subdivision entrance. Sarah Chen had racked up repeated citations for architectural deviations ever since she dared to challenge the HOA budget during an open forum. The pattern was unmistakable. Karen was abusing her authority to retaliate against any hint of dissent and to swell the association's funds with invented penalties. By the time the sun rose, I had assembled a substantial dossier of proof: bank records confirming timely payments, captured images of tampered entries, and a detailed chronology of vindictive measures taken against fellow owners. My next first outreach that morning was to Mitchell Graves, a lawyer who focused on HOA conflicts. Once he examined my evidence, he let out a slow whistle and delivered the phrase that ignited real optimism in me: she's handed us everything required to dismantle her completely. Over the following 2 days, we constructed an ironclad case. Mitchell unearthed several breaches of state laws governing HOA operations, such as neglecting to issue proper notifications for assessments, falsifying financial data, and systematically intimidating residents. He drafted 3 key legal instruments: a cease and desist letter, an official grievance to the State Real Estate Board, and a lawsuit seeking monetary compensation. Moving date: scheduled departure date dawned with oppressive summer warmth, the atmosphere heavy with moisture and anticipation. The movers had already packed nearly all my possessions when Karen's SUV skidded to a halt, once again obstructing the truck. She stepped out, poised like a commander ready for combat, clutching her cell phone. A cluster of onlookers had assembled in nearby yards, drawn by the unmistakable scent of impending spectacle. Mrs. Patterson, from a couple of houses away, had even dragged out a folding chair. "I'm convening an emergency board session this instant," Karen proclaimed, brandishing her device like a sword. "You won't budge until your unpaid debts to this neighborhood are settled. The board will back me, as they always have." I remained composed, allowing her to vent about neighborhood guidelines and the necessity of adhering to protocol. When she finally stopped to draw breath, I retrieved the thick manila envelope. "Actually, Karen, I doubt the board will stand behind you much longer." Emergency board meeting. Her fingers shook faintly as she accepted the packet, her assurance cracking while she scanned the cease and desist demand. Her complexion underwent a dramatic shift, paling to ashen, then flushing with furious patches. Her gaze bulged upon reaching the attached summary outlining proof of her deceitful practices. "This is absurd," she stammered, though her tone had lost its customary command. "You have no evidence for any of it. I've only been safeguarding our home values, enforcing the rules that preserve this community's appeal." I grinned and motioned toward the expanding group of spectators. "On the contrary, the proof is overwhelming, and I'm far from alone in collecting it." Several others here have been tracking your inventive bookkeeping as well. Tomor evidence evinced from the gathering, clutching his own binder. I have duplicates of every check I sent. Karen, right down to the ones you insisted arrived late. Sarah Chen moved beside him, brandishing her phone. I've got audio from our previous 3 gatherings, including the session where you vowed to penalize me over my daughters. Chalk drawings on the sidewalk. Karen's meticulously built veneer shattered as additional residents came forward bearing their own documentation. The truck driver lounged against his cab, clearly entertained by the unfolding drama. Even Mrs. Patterson had set aside her yarn to witness Karen's dominion disintegrate before everyone's eyes. 3 days afterward, as I unpacked cartons in my fresh residence, my phone lit up with a notification from Mitchell. Karen loses her job. Karen had been formally served papers at her office, a mortgage firm where she held the role of senior loan officer. The delicious irony escaped no one. A person who tampered with housing finances as a hobby did so for a living. G2. The hastily called HOA board assembly that ensued was, per Tom's exuberant texts, more riveting than any scripted drama. An independent examiner was summoned to scrutinize the association's finances, and the results were devastating. More than $50,000 in dubious assessments and sanctions had been amassed during Karen's tenure. Backed by shoddy records and highly suspect trends, the board unanimously elected to oust her from leadership without delay. She rose abruptly, cheeks blazing with fury and shame, toppling her chair as she bolted from the room. But consequently, the fallout extended far beyond that. The state real estate oversight body initiated a probe into her occupational behavior, while the prosecutor's office weighed felony fraud accusations. My personal suit drew in 7 more plaintiffs, evolving into a class action claim pursuing over $200,000 in restitution. The mounting attorney costs threatened to ruin her financially, and her professional certification hung in jeopardy. The once feared enforcer of trivial regulations and whimsical penalties now confronted penalties of her own that could burden her for decades. The ultimate revelation arrived via forwarded message from Tom. Amid the review, auditors learned Karen had been secretly negotiating to acquire my former house through a front entity, intending to renovate and resell at a markup. She had deliberately undermined my transaction to depress the asking price, positioning herself for a bargain steal. Her own avarice had sealed her fate. As I grew comfortable in my new community, one mercifully devoid of despotic HOA overlords, I got one final report. Karen had been found guilty of fraud, receiving 2 years of probation and 300 hours of mandated public service. In a touch of judicial irony, the court directed her efforts toward an organization that assisted owners battling exploitative HOA tactics. She remained in the dock, tears tracing down her cheeks as the verdict was announced. Her realm of minuscule dominance lay in ruins.